guiding principles, and we are not specifically going to be using his guiding principles because, as we know, everything is local. So what we're going to do is use them as a template for how we may want to move forward in terms of, what our fundamental goals and objectives and principles will be. And so, having said that, if you all have a moment to review the fundamental principles that the Poor People's Campaign on a national level have done, have you all seen these? Many of you probably have already reviewed these online, but I'm just gonna take a moment to look at some of the ones that you might want to use for ours, and I'm going to go ahead and record what we come up with today. So I'll just go ahead and say that we're rooted in moral analysis based on the deepest religious and constitutional values that demand justice for all. Moral revival is necessary to save the heart and soul of our democracy. We are committed to lifting up and deepening the leadership of those most affected by systemic racism, poverty, the war, economy, the ecological devastation, and to building unity across lines of division. We believe in dismantling the unjust criminalization systems that exploit poor communities and communities of color, and the transformation of the war economy into a peace economy that values humanity. We believe that equal protection under the law is non-negotiable. We believe that people should not live or die from poverty in the richest nation ever to exist. Blaming the poor and claiming the United States does not have an abundance of resources to overcome poverty are false narratives used to perpetuate economic exploitation, exclusion, and deep inequality. We recognize the centrality of systemic racism in maintaining economic oppression must be named, detailed, and exposed empirically, morally, spiritually. Poverty and economic inequality cannot be understood apart from a society built on white supremacy. We aim to shift the distorted moral narrative promoted by religious extremists in the nation from issues like prayer in schools, abortion, and gun rights to one that is concerned with how our society treats the poor, those on the margins, the least of these, women, LGBTQIA folks, workers, immigrants, and disabled, and the sick, equality and representation under the law, and the desire for peace, love, harmony within and among nations. We will build up the power of people and state-based movements to serve as a vehicle for a powerful moral movement in the country and to transform the political, economic, and moral structures of our society. We recognize that the need to organize at the state and local level, many of the most regressive policies are being passed at the state level, and these policies will have long and lasting effect past even executive orders. The movement is not from above, but from below. We do our work in a nonpartisan way. No elected officials or candidates get to stage or serve on the stage organizing committee or of the campaign. This is not about left and right, Democratic or Republican, but about right and wrong. We uphold the need to do a season of sustained moral direct action as a way to break through the tweets and shifts of the moral narrative. We are demonstrating the power of people coming together across issues and geography and putting our bodies on the line to the issues that are affecting us all. The campaign and all its participants and endorsers embrace nonviolence. Violent tactics or actions will not be tolerated. Now, having read this is a national movement, let's get down to the brass tacks of the local Poor People's Campaign in terms of what we want to see in our county. We are looking at data. When we look at data in our county, we know what is going on. When we look at the laws that are enacted to protect all people, we know who these laws are based against. And that is poor people, minority groups of people, and especially vulnerable, mentally ill people, as well as people that are children. And so right now, what we have to come up with are, how are we going to guide this movement in Monterey County? And so what I'd like to do is to have people determine what that's going to look like, because I'd like to see all of us have shared decision-making, but I think what has to happen is, number one has to be respect. I mean, I think that respect for all people here and respect for people's ideas, whether you like them or not, respect is important. So people can have differences, but we must respect one another in terms of how we want to see what our goals and objectives are. And I think that I don't want to do the talking. What I'd like to do is like the writing, and to start coming up with local guiding principles for the Poor People's Campaign. And I think that, I don't know if you feel I think that it's important for us to say for self-determination and economic justice. So are people in agreement with the Poor People's Campaign for Monterey County for self-determination and economic justice? Would that be something, because I'd like to put that on the table from my perspective, and we can go into more details about that later. But is that okay with everyone? Yeah, okay, great. So as people, first and foremost, can we just make sure that anyone that has walked in while we're talking, and we're going to keep this moving because we only have 2 hours altogether, and we got an hour and 45 minutes left, and I really want to get us down to the business of what is going to be our number one priority that we're going to work on. And I think we all know what that is. And because you haven't been on the mailing list, but it's voting. We have to be involved in the voting, making sure that everyone that can vote must vote. And we have less than 6 months to do that, because in November, voting is going to happen again. Without a vote, your voice won't matter.
Our voices don't matter even when we do vote.
Well, we'll talk about that. But
I sure hope so.
we can talk about anything that people want to put on the table. But already, the majority of the people that have come here before have put down voting as a major issue that has to happen. And the U.S. Census is getting ready to happen as well, and that is where allocation of funds are going to be. So it does make sense, and it doesn't have to be my way, but I do think that we have to be realistic about what the issues are going to be. For poor people, they need resources, and we need to make sure that those that we put into office make sure that the least of us are taken care of, so that they're going to put forward what we put them in office to do. So anyway, I'll go ahead and start, and I'm not going to say anything else. People can just go ahead and pick up the mantle around what else they want to see now.
I think people, if we're going to push people to vote, they should also be involved in the process so they know what they're voting for and fighting for bigger pieces of the pie, not just the crumbs we're left with to vote on after everybody else has decided.
Okay, so let's go over the guiding principles now and how we want to and then we're going to move into the top priorities that people listed, and we don't have to, I just listed what they were in the order in which they were articulated. So I'll talk about that and we can decide, because it doesn't have to just be one thing that people work on. If someone else feels like voting is not the most salient issue of the day, then we can move that person into something else.
So the decision to focus on voting was already made by a previous group, so whoever's here today doesn't have a voice?
Well,
Or
no, it has
we're
nothing
not
to
going
do
to
with.
revisit that priority?
Well, let's just put it this way. Right now, what we're going to focus on is the guiding principles. So let's focus on that. And then what I said was, those were a template that was put forward by the National Poor People's Campaign, but this is Monterey County, so we're going to come up with our own, which you can be a part of. Pardon me?
These look like a darn good template. you know, if we get into wordsmithing, it'll take hours and hours and hours. But whatever.
Yeah, we're not gonna get into wordsmithing, these are just for you to know, what do you want our guiding principles to be? That this is the national guiding principles, which makes sense on a national level, but all politics is local, and all resources and poor people are living here in Monterey County, and all the other areas that are doing this are doing it germane to their area and jurisdiction. So that's kind of what I'm kind of recommending for us, is to come up with some guiding principles.
Okay, initially you talked about a number of laws that are harmful to poor, and now you're talking about voting. Could you specify just one of those laws, and then maybe we can attempt to determine how to change it?
Okay, we'll
Okay.
take the penal code, for example.
Uh-huh.
The big blue book with all the laws that are stacked against poor people. So the minute a
Well, now,
child,
see, when you say something like that, I want to know exactly which ones are stacked against poor people.
okay, well, let's just take, for example.
Bill?
Well, let's do this. Let's focus right now, we'll get into the data and deducting the data. But right now, what we're gonna do is come up with our guiding principles, because we have to accomplish, how are we gonna govern what we're gonna be doing? And so if we get into that area, we can come back to that, but let's focus right now on guiding principles, how we want to govern, how we're gonna be operating in terms of like respect, you know, every voice matters, are we gonna be, whatever guiding principles you wanna bring to the table. This guiding principle that, the fundamental principles that the National Poor People's Campaign, I gave you that all so that you can refer to it and maybe start to think about locally how you wanna see our guiding principles. Yes?
Maybe if there could be a subgroup, if there's people who are interested in actual numbers and data and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I'm an engineer too, and, or not too, but I'm an engineer, and I start thinking the same way. It's like, what are the numbers for voting, before and after? What are we aiming for and stuff like that? So if people want to do a subgroup of people who are interested in stuff like that, maybe we could break off and then report back. Does that sound like an idea?
Yeah, that's gonna happen, but we have to have some tool that's going to govern how we're gonna
Sure.
operate. We're gonna have to decide when we wanna meet, and those subgroups will be meeting. And then when we come back together as a collective, for example, there are a number of top priorities here, so those subgroups, that's where they will decide if they wanna be on that, or if they're gonna create some other items that are maybe their priorities, and then bring in more people, because it just doesn't have to be these people in this room. There's other people that can come to the table and help with some of the subcommittee work that needs to happen. But I do think that right now, so what I've come up with is the Poor People's Campaign for Self-Determination and Economic Justice for Monterey County. So I thought I heard someone else say something else.
I have a suggestion. Are you asking for suggestions out as determining the self-determination and economic?
Right now, we're going to go over how we're gonna govern our Poor People's Campaign.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna come up with, I think that having respect for everyone's opinions is one thing, and that we can agree that we're all gonna be able to think for ourselves, but be respectful of other people. So I just think that respect is a very important guiding principle that we should have in this campaign, because we're gonna get a varied opinions and ideas, because everyone has their area of expertise and their goals and desires of what they want to see happen. And so we have to be respectful of those things, even if we don't necessarily think that that's our personal, priority. Yeah. Do you understand? Excuse me.
Can we base things on a consensus model? I mean, that's kind of a guideline? Is that what you're looking for?
In terms of consensus for how we're moving forward, voting?
Well,
you mean?
like when something comes up and we're discussing it, and somebody doesn't like it and somebody does, how do we come to agreement, you know? Is it,
Jenna, are you asking, are we gonna do things by majority vote, or is it going to be that we all have to agree? Is that what you're asking? Like what type of?
well, I don't think we can really get it all or nothing voting, but kind of a guidelines on just kind of consensus process so that, for decision making.
You know, I think there's going to be enough, I don't think we should have people's desires discounted because this person doesn't like it and that person does, kind of thing. So if there's someone that's really passionate about something that they want to bring to this poor people's campaign, and they know that it is an issue, and then maybe they say, you know, I know for a fact, for example, that there are revenues coming into the community, and the revenues aren't being used for this. So I'd like for us to show up to City Hall and voice our concern about this. And there may be someone else that says, well, I don't think that that should be a priority. I think that this should be a priority. Well, if there's a group that wants to deal with that issue, then let's take Measure X, okay? Everybody knows about Measure X in Monterey County?
No, I don't.
No. Well, it's the TAMC tax dollars. Remember what we all voted for? Okay, now in Seaside, you see these nice, beautiful bike lanes going up Broadway, right? Although, all throughout the community, we've got potholes in the streets of every major thoroughfare up to and including all up and down streets in Seaside. Now, if we had a voice and an opportunity to say, why can't we use our tax dollars first and take care of our own house cleaning? For example, fix the potholes in the streets of Seaside instead of putting the bike trails up, you know, the bike lanes up first, that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and then there's like $20-something million extra left over. So people don't even know about these things, right? So this is what I'm saying is that, you know, there's a lot of things going on that are revenue generators, but we don't have a voice. You know, is there a possibility that, you know, transportation dollars can also have a bus that goes around and picks up poor people at night and takes them to a shelter that we are aware of that exists? Those are the kinds of things that I'm kind of maybe talking about, but I'm not saying that anything that you're saying is like a consensus, but I don't know if that makes sense to you, that if we're voting on something, I don't think that this is like we can have this but not the other thing, because everything's important.
No, yeah, that wasn't one, but it's fine.
So,
Maybe we're on the same page, it's just I didn't express myself.
well, maybe I'm not expressing myself in
No.
terms of making it clear, but
Well, did you have a decision-making process when you came to the notion of certain priorities at the previous meeting? How was that done? Was it done by just a survey?
yeah, it was done, what we did was, and we're just getting started, so nothing's etched in stone. So this meeting today is to share with you all the input that was provided and what people that were at that meeting.
So it was by survey, not by a vote or a
Right, it was
consensus or
just,
anything?
it was, people filled out a tool
Okay.
and put their top priorities.
So we haven't practiced making a decision as a group yet.
Pardon me?
We haven't practiced making a decision as a group yet. And I think that's what Janet's point was. How would we do that?
How would we practice?
How would we make a decision as a group? By what process?
Well, because there's a myriad of different issues, we're gonna, like this young lady, what is your name?
Oh, Janet.
Not Janet, the other person in the black.
Oh, Nalini?
Nolini mentioned subcommittees. Well, that's where, like, everybody's voice is gonna matter here. So if a person wants to vote on, or to work on something that is not like, I know that voting is critical right now. There are a lot of young people in this community that are not registered to vote because they feel their voice doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay, so we've gotta make sure that they get registered and they can exercise their right to vote. People died so that I could sit here today. Medgar Evers died registering people to vote. So we have a lot of white supremacy going on in this country that wants to roll back the voting for people. And we know that we have a president right now that feels like a lot of us are from countries that are inhumane. So voting, if you don't exercise your vote, then you have no voice, in other words. People have a right to vote or not to vote, but
I don't agree with that, but that's another topic.
yeah, that's definitely, but that is one of the priorities, is to get us folks to register people to vote. And one of the things, I've already met with the sheriff's office, and we're gonna be going into the jails to register every person that can vote in the jail. So, at any rate, voting is critical for, the NAACP is a civil rights organization, the oldest civil rights organization in the country, that has made sure that every piece of major legislation in this country that has passed came through the NAACP and the struggle, and people died so that they could vote. A lot of people don't feel like their voice matters, and we've got to change that because their voice does matter. So let's, the young lady back here, can you say your name and what group you're with?
My name's Christy, and I'm with Whites for Racial Equity and also SAS, Safe Ag, Safe Schools. And I was just talking to a lot of people about voting lately because I find a lot of younger people in the community aren't registered to vote.
Right.
So I lead in with the fact that Arizona has outlawed Latino studies, and California is talking about doing that. A lot of schools are starting to question if there's a black student union, why can't there be a white student union? I don't know what they do in a white student union, but at any rate, what culture they would talk about, what history they would talk about, would probably be militant and criminal. But anyway, what I know is that you can go to the registrar, the Monterey County registrars. They've got a new building over in Schilling, and I think they will give you up to 25 registers to vote. So I carry them in my car, and I talk to kids. I said, "Are you registered to vote? Can you vote?" "Yeah, I am, but I don't think." And then I say, "Well, they're going to outlaw talking about your heritage." "And you're kidding me." "Oh, that's happening?" So I think people don't know what's happening. I think there's so much on the national level that's not right in a few ways, just starting with Russia, that people are overwhelmed by the news, and they don't know how to take it personal. So I would just on a personal level, encourage people to go to Monterey County elections and get registration cards for elections, and then make it your personal, because people don't believe it. And one person of color says, "Well, I don't know that it matters if I vote." And I said, "Well, and it wouldn't matter whether it was a person of color or not that I was talking to." I said, "But if people didn't vote, Obama wouldn't have been elected." So voting is really important.
Right, that's very true. It sounds to me like people are anxious a little bit about wanting to come up with some priorities. So I'm gonna keep this here. If you think of some things that you wanna add to our, how we're gonna be, operating in terms of I do wanna have us at least come up with how often we wanna come back as a group to meet versus subcommittees. So, yes.
Well, I have something, I'm very much for this voter registration and getting everybody prepared to vote. But I think we should also be addressing who they have to vote for. At least within our local elections, we should be certain that there are people running for office who stand for the principles of the Poor People's Campaign. So there's a real there's somebody to vote for when you get in the
Yeah.
polls.
Okay, that's a great idea. You know, the other thing too is, can we put down here, and does it make sense to put down here that data will be reviewed around how we're guiding ourselves? For example, how many homeless people are living in our community of Seaside, of Monterey, of whatever cities? Are there any facilities that are designed here locally to deal with people that are experiencing food insecurity? Children who need a pair of new tennis shoes to go to school so that they don't feel ostracized. I mean, those are all kinds of things that, you know, you would think that would be concerned about, especially single parents that are working 3 and 4 jobs and their kids are out like no place to go and they're just kind of getting into trouble. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things that the Poor People's Campaign can really set the tone for, to make sure that fair and equitable distribution of the resources that come into our cities and counties go to the right cause. So, yes.
I wanted to offer, as I was looking at the, I don't know if this might go under fundamental principles or part of a priority, but it's occurring to me, one thing that I would like to see for us to prioritize as a principle is empowering the poor and the homeless in terms of civic engagement. So instead of so often, like how do we, I mean, people who are homeless should also be available to vote. But that, I would say that would be a very difficult thing to do, but so I
It's
think
really
like
easy,
if we were
actually.
prioritizing not just doing for the poor, but really identifying and like figuring out how are we going to get them civically engaged and reach out to them, that would be for me a high priority, and that would speak to and I'm going to say our, not just their, our voices being fuller.
Well, I put down what you just said, empowering the poor and the homeless in terms of civic engagement. And what, you know, I don't want to get into this long discussion about what that could look like, but one example would be for a group to hit the pavement with some voter registration forms and to have a place for them to come to so that they can exercise their voice, and to let them know, you know, are you available to go to city council meetings? Where are you? How can we stay in touch with you? And that this meeting's going on, we want the poor people here so that they can be a part of the decision-making process around what their issues are, because I don't think anyone in this room, I might be wrong, but I mean, we probably have shelter. Most of us in this room have shelter. But what about the people that are living on the bus stop with a little cart and, you know, they're being told to get out of town because, you know, especially downtown Monterey where the tourists are, you can't sit on the bus stop anymore.
They wouldn't be worrying about potholes.
Right. You know, the thing is that the reality is that there's got to be more done, and their voices have to be heard, and the only way their voices are going to be heard is if they're involved in the process. So you're right. So I did put that down. Yes, John.
I think there's another angle that's connected to all of the insights that have been shared so far, and that is education. Registering someone who has not voted before to vote does not automatically prepare such a person to vote responsibly.
Right, and you know,
That's the part about
a
getting
great
involved in the
point.
process.
I did put education down there, and I've already spoken with Mrs. Rucker, and she has the voting empowerment office on right there, so we're gonna have at least one place, but I've already talked to some churches as well, as that we can collaborate with them to have that as a place for them to go and get educated around voting. And so I think that that is like something that has been thought about, but her office is for voter education, and not just about voting, but education in general. You know, when these tax dollars come up on the ballots and all that kind of stuff, educating people about that. There's people that have children in school or grandchildren, the LCAP funding that can help with, like, I wouldn't like my child's needs to be met because they can't read at grade level, but I want them to get a private tutor with the LCAP dollars that are available. Is that happening? No. Do parents know about that? No. Do any of you in the room know about the LCAP funding?
No.
Well, no one's telling us this. And see, this is why it is important for us to be looking at, there are innate resources available right before our eyes. That we don't have to really reinvent the wheel too much, but if we look at what resources are available and hold the powers to be accountable, then half the battle is gonna be won. But if we don't even know ourselves, then we got a lot of work to do.
And people don't know about Reverend Barber, you know, so,
Bishop.
in the last week, when I started in the last month hearing about him and seeing him on YouTube and the fact that what he's doing around the country, I thought, wow, and then I heard that he's just taking the, what Martin Luther King had started, and just continuing it. People don't know about him. And in the last week, I've talked to at least 4 people who were complaining about their rent, and I said, well, have you heard about the Poor People's Campaign? And, you know, Reverend Barber is going around the country, and when you're poor, and most of us are, you identify with your poverty so much that you don't have a voice in what you eat tonight, you don't have a voice in whether you're gonna eat tomorrow, you don't have a voice. So the idea of voting almost seems secondhand, you know, compared. But what I get when I tell them about Reverend Barber is that, oh, somebody's talking about this. This is something that we're talking about. And I think if there'd be some way we could just get them engaged with their own life as far as having witness to their poverty, just simply as the fact that people are marching about this. This is something talking about.
Right.
So if there's like a little card or something, you know, with a Google this. I found out about this meeting through Whites for Racial Equity. Their website is so amazing because it has so many things regarding equity and racial equity, and we have so much need in this area. So, but a lot of people never heard of Whites for Racial Equity, you know, and so if we could get some way of saying, you know, here's a website, you can Google it, you can see more about Reverend Barber. Oh, and there's a local chapter. We're doing this in your backyard. People are meeting and talking about this here and now. That would be great.
So I put down, create a card as a way of providing to people with a website.
Yeah, but just getting them to know that it's happening.
Regina, I think she's calling my name.
Yes. Yeah.
So the NAACP website currently has a repository of Poor People's Campaign information nationally and what we're doing locally. So it's
DNA?
NAACP.
Oh, and,
Yeah,
sorry.
So you'll see a link at the top that says Poor People's Campaign. And we're beginning to develop that site. But it occurred to me before Chrissy spoke that poor people may not be cruising the internet. I mean, that might not be a priority. However,
Neither is voter registration.
what?
Neither is voter registration.
However, I'd like to finish my thought. It is a place where this group can pull all the information, so
Right.
we can use it for resources. All the subcommittees can use what we found and go out and use it in the community. So I really would encourage us to continue to develop that
Oh,
part
yeah,
of the
we're definitely
NAACP.
gonna.
Yeah, as a resource repository in a similar way. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think with some of these, like, if you go to the community center in Chinatown, you will see poor people there cruising the internet. Because they have computer services available to them. We could do some outreach through that. And that new place, Dorothy's Place, and their new center, so some of the places that provide services directly to homeless people.
And the libraries.
And the libraries.
Is it a place for women, women's
Place for,
gathering?
yeah, place for
Yeah.
women.
A lot of people have phones too.
Yeah, they've got cell phones, I'm not sure how limited their plans are or anything.
Wi-Fi.
There's a free phone that the government was giving out, I don't know if
I
they're
know they
still
got
giving
free
it.
phones, but is it just a phone or can you surf the net?
It's still giving, it's still
There's
giving
Yeah.
them.
Can you
There's
surf the
Wi-Fi.
net on those phones or is it
Yes,
just
the
a-
Obama phones, yes.
They are, huh?
Yes, okay, so, let's see. Okay, so basically, at this point, I'm gonna continue to develop these guiding principles and, how we're gonna be governing, ourselves. I think that it's a living, dynamic, ongoing, document that will continue to be updated, but it can't just be based on, you know, people's touchy-feely things. There are realities out here that we're living. I'll just take the NAACP, since I am its current branch president, and I happen to know that I show up to court on average 2 and 3 times a week for poor people who don't have attorneys, who don't have representation, who haven't seen their public defenders. And in fact, LULAC and Guadalupe and myself went yesterday and visited a gentleman in Monterey County Jail who's been housed there, and he's basically being railroaded through the system. So there's a lot of stuff going on where people are, I mean, we're coming here and meeting and all that, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done for poor people that are not just in the streets, living on benches. There are people that are being railroaded, parents whose kids, I was in juvenile hall court the other day, and when the NAACP shows up to juvenile court, the judge allows us to have communication. And there are so many kids from this community alone that are being arrested at school, that are being railroaded to the juvenile justice department, and it has got to end. If we sit back and say that voting is not an issue, then it is, because we are the ones that put these people in office, and we're the ones that can take them out. Because if they don't do what is right for the children of this community, the children of poverty, and particularly the children of color, these are the ones that are in juvenile hall. These are the ones that you see when I show up to court, they're the ones in the handcuffs, going up before the judge with no legal representation. These rich kids are getting off, they're getting diversion for the opiate epidemic that's happening. They get to go to a program. The poor kids and the poor young adults that have trauma in their lives are being railroaded through the criminal justice system, and they end up in prison. And so there's that going on. And the reason I know about this is because I'm showing up, okay? I don't want to show up because I have a lot of other things to do, but if I don't show up, then who's going to show up? So maybe we can get a subcommittee together of people that are willing to show up from this campaign when people have to go to court, so that the judge knows that we're watching and that we're looking, and that whatever you're going to sentence these folks to, it needs to be fair and just, and it needs to be something around prevention. Prevention. What happened to prevention?
Man.
Yeah, you know, that's really important because, you know, as I was sitting here, the pastor of my church just said, you know, he wished, you know, he wanted me to bring back, like, what happened here.
Mhm.
And so if we, that kind of stuff, you know, to me, it's like, we can take an issue like that. There's a lot of lawyers in our community, you know what I mean? So we can, like, if we just decide, I mean, nobody can do everything. But if people say, okay, I'll take that issue, you know, and say, I'll get a couple of lawyers who, you know, live down the street from me, or who will go to the church, and say, okay, we'll get training from you, you know, or so, I mean, does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it absolutely
So-
doesn't.
so
We need
then-
attorneys.
We need it, so, but I don't wanna, you know, you going on I mean, I wanna get to the subcommittees, so I want you to go and, until we get to the, you know,
Yeah.
get through your agenda.
Right, so
Yeah.
basically, at this point in time, what you have currently is the agenda, the guiding principles that Barber created, and Martin Luther King's information about his Poor People's Campaign that he was involved in, and that has never ended. The Poor People's Campaign has never died, because poor people have not realized their full equitable distribution of America's wealth. So having said that, let us get down to how often we're gonna meet and what committees we want to have formed. I do know, yes, Judy?
No, I'm finished, but you're gonna
Okay,
say.
I would like for us to definitely, the midterm elections are critical. They are absolutely critical, and if people think that's not their priority, that's fine and dandy. But there are about 5 young people that are the ages of, I'd say, between 22 and 30 that I just canvassed in one little area. None of them are registered to vote, period. Now that's really not okay, because we know that all politics is local. And we know that unless they exercise their right to vote, then, and they feel like their vote is going to matter, and the only way their vote is going to matter is if they put people in office that are going to represent their needs, not what we think their needs are, but what they think their needs are. So I would like to start with these subcommittees, and one of the subcommittees is going to be the Voter Empowerment and Education Committee. So I'll put that as one, and then any other people can chime in about what other committees. Yes, Judy?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important ones. Also on the ballot this fall in California, there's a rent control measure. And not everybody here has their own house. I'm a renter, and I know it's an incredibly important issue in Monterey alone. The majority of people living in Monterey are renters. So I think that's something that we really need to focus on too, in terms of supporting why we want people to vote, because they've outlawed any rent control measures, but this would overturn it in the state, and it's very important to have the option for communities to enact rent control. The other thing I wanted to say when we were talking before is, to me, I'm really interested in criminal justice issues, and I think that restorative justice programs are so important. I'm reading this book by James Foreman Jr., Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Latin America, and at the end of the book he talks about a young man, I'll be real quick, who was going to be sentenced. He was a juvenile, he was almost going to be tried as an adult, but he robbed somebody, he had a knife, and what prevented him from being sent to jail was the person who was the victim came to court and actually testified. They found a program for him. He loved carpentry. They were able to find a community program, a diversion program to put him in. And it kept him from going to jail. And then, like years later, James Foreman met this young man. He was working in a construction job. But things like that, I think, are so important. So criminal justice is something I think is important. With maybe, as you say, what we have to focus on are the documenting the issues locally, who is being sent to jail, the prosecution, why the public defenders aren't able to, I don't know, all that.
Yeah, well, I put, okay, so I've got these two. I've got the voter empowerment and education and criminal justice. Are there other subcommittees people want to bring forward? Yes.
Well, I guess this committee kind of underlies everything. I've been taking notes on all the questions that people have brought up and see what the numbers are there. How many kids are at grade level in what school?
Right.
And so on and so forth. What places are there? I like to see numbers so we can know.
Data committee?
Yeah, a data committee. So I'd like to suggest that if anybody would like, we can figure out what exactly is going on.
Okay, the data committee, I got that, yes.
How about a public pressure committee? As per this line in the handout on the MLK, the next phase was to begin public demonstrations, pass nonviolent civil disobedience, and mass arrest to protest the plight of poverty in this country. I'd like to see a committee that would work on massive public protests.
Okay,
Because I think that's the way we can do that mythical holding feet to fire that we're told to do when we do elect a politician that promises us everything. Then we're told after they get in office, we'll hold their feet to the fire if they're lesser evil. Well, we'll get them in and we'll just make them do this or that. And every time I've tried to hold a politician's feet to fire, I'm criticized for not being respectful. So we have to break through that and really be serious about our demands instead of this artificial deportment and this insistence on being polite while people are dying.
Right. Okay, so I have 4 committees, and then this gentleman, and then,
So like an endorsement and a grading scale. With this data, we'd be able to grade the incumbents and candidates who are going to run school boards, hospital boards, water boards, as well as city councils and judges, and see how what they say is actually what they do, and even if they even care to do it at all.
okay, so a grading scale committee?
Right, which would probably fall in line with an endorsement. You know, you grade them A, B, C, or F, and
Okay, that's great, because the NAACP has a report card. And what they do is they list all the politicians and what their grades are. They get an A, B, C, D, E, or
yes.
F. And we could do a model already like that. And I have examples that I brought back from the national convention that we could use as a model for whoever's going to help with this committee. That would be really great. And then, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you talked about a couple of things where there was this money available and nobody knew about it. Maybe we could have a committee that sort of search for public money available.
Public funds committee?
Yeah, public funds.
Funds, okay, public.
Resources available in the community.
Got a hand on your left? When you're done typing.
Okay, is there, yes?
Is the first committee gonna include the actually going to Dorothy's and other places to register people to vote, or is it gonna focus more on the education piece?
We're definitely
You'll do
looking
both?
at doing both.
Okay.
We're looking at being able to utilize, we definitely already have here in Seaside, Helen Rucker's office,
Right.
which she's there and can educate people. And we could find the same kind of thing over in Salinas somewhere where they could actually go there and get educated. I don't know where that would be. We probably need to figure out and collaborate with someone over there. And then in Monterey, I don't know if there's a need for something over there, but
A
it's,
place for women would be nice.
okay. Well, so, you know, what I think would make the best sense is, number one, we've got to get people registered to vote, but we also have to educate them
Right.
on what these initiatives are that are coming on the ballot, so that
And
they
why
can
they
make,
must vote.
right.
I mean, the number of people who vote is so abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
It's well below 50%. What difference does it make if we have 100% voter registration and only 10% vote?
Right.
It's the voting that matters.
People have to, and the thing is about what I envision is because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that we're looking at from now until November, okay? And so with data, there's already tools that they have out there that tells you people that are not registered, who voted, when they voted, so we can do a couple things. We can get the people registered to vote, get them to vote, and get their absentee ballots, make sure that we're following up with these folks, and then make sure that we turn out the vote. It's not just registering people, but turning out the vote is critical as well.
So
And
does the same committee then do all of those things, that first committee?
yeah, we could have like this voting empowerment committee we could do threefold thing. We can do outreach, get people
Actual
registered to
registering.
vote, we
And
could follow up
census.
with them. We need to figure out, say for instance, there is a homeless person that wants to be able to vote.
Right.
Well, what are the rules around a homeless person being able to vote? So does anyone know that?
Yes, description, legal description of where they're at. So I'm 20 feet away from a telephone pole at 20 Soledad.
Okay, so where does their voter card go?
They do either general delivery, a mailing address type of thing, either at a church or Dorothy's
Okay.
or interim or gathering for women.
Okay.
I think there needs to be, if this is going to be a long sustainable movement and not a flash in the pan movement, I think there needs to be some sort of inter-educational committee. So for instance, whatever the subject is, if it's where do poor people vote, let's say that's the subject. Then you have a committee who's actually going to go out and figure that stuff out and bring it so, and educate the rest of us about it, or certainly the people that are on that committee. Or the same thing when it comes to, and I'm hearing some disagreement in the room, and there'll be other issues that there'll be disagreements. disagreements about, but let's say voting. So there are people in the room that think that's absolutely essential and must be done. I think then we need to like gather like arguments for that. And if the people who have very strong idea on the other place, that they're gathering the same thing, so that we're all kind of, so that we're kind of thinking, we have some evidence we have some arguments, some evidence, not just, you know, purely data, but we have some evidence about what is the rationale for the reasons why we're doing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I experience in the greater voting community that people guard voting. You know, there's a lot of people, and I worked at the polls for 9 years, and they guard the right to vote, and some people are up in arms that we don't have to show our ID when we go to vote. And they protect this, and rightfully so, because we saw that election where the Supreme Court voted for us. So, but I think in the education process, I heard you say that we need to have, if we're going to register voters, we need to have educated voters. And the fear that if we just start handing out, it's like credit cards, you know, then people really won't be thinking and voting. So I think there's a real fear of that in the community at large, in the country at large. That and of course that went to severe when civil rights happened. That went to, you know, and it still's happened in a couple of elections where people weren't allowed to vote or.
Well, on the other hand, we're assuming that the people that we're targeting to vote don't have common sense, that they literally, because back in the South, in Mississippi, when people were standing in line, they had these little tests that they had to do to prove their competency. The thing is, people are smarter than we think. People know that if they're hungry and there's some candidates out there running for office, and they're not putting their information forward, where we're going to have to make sure that these folks are on target with, is we're going to have to make sure that they know about these initiatives, because the candidates are going to have to sell themselves, okay? But the initiatives are where people are really going to have to be, like, for example, you mentioned the rent control, Measure T or the 10, is it, because that was brought up at the National Convention. And that the California State NAACP, I have to tell you, is totally against the rent control, because what it is it's couched into something that is going to look like it's really thinking about the poor, but it's really to exclude the poor from even being able to rent anywhere. So there's a lot of anecdotal information. I'm going to share that with you because you brought that up, because I know that the NAACP has done due diligence and its homework around why they're against this measure on the ballot, because it's by all these big, huge conglomerates that want to move all of the poor people out of these areas. So we'll talk more about that.
See, that's precisely what I'm talking about. I think that we need, so that sort of stuff is what we need to mull over before we make some decisions, because otherwise it's very easy to end up a soldier in someone else's army and not necessarily know what is the rationale of why you're struggling for something.
Okay, no, that is absolutely true. I agree wholeheartedly. But everybody needs to be registered to vote. If you can vote and you're of age, you need to be registered to vote.
So the places that, if we go and we do a spread of just only registering people to vote, we should try to log those places, because those people we're trying to empower, we also still want to come back with our grading report as well, to help empower people of what kind of decisions we think they ought to make.
Okay, can I just say too, that when we register people to vote, we're not going to just haphazardly register people to vote. We're going to track those people. We're going to do due diligence to ensure that we're following up with them and that they truly are, you know, informed. We're going to refer them to the voter education office that Helen Rucker occupies, because she's there and she can sit down with them and make sure that they get educated so that they can make their own informed decisions, that we aren't influencing how they vote, but at least they're educated around what these issues are. And so, but the bottom line is that, if you don't vote, don't complain about politics, because,
That's not fair. We live in a very systemically unjust system.
yes,
And our Republican and Democratic politicians are owned by the same masters. There was a Princeton study done very recently that said that this is not a democracy. It's not even what you can call a representative democracy. So acting as if the panacea for what ails us is dropping a little ballot in their box every 4 or 2 years is gonna fix this is delusional. We need
gotta get
massive
loan
public
process.
pressure in addition to, anybody can vote and do what they want. Meanwhile, I totally believe in down ticket voting, but once you get up above assembly, I mean, look at Panetta. He's a warmonger. He's down in the whole program of the foreign policy, which is in the hands of the.
okay.
Remember that, that's why we can't have anything nice, because we're spending $700 billion a year, a massive budget bigger than Trump even wanted, that was voted in by Democrats and Republicans.
Okay, all politics
So,
is local. All politics
I'm
is
just
local.
saying, it's the system, and if we don't act and create massive public pressure to change that locally by going to, in a bunch of people going to city council meetings.
Absolutely.
I've done it, I've knocked on hundreds of poor people's doors, and I can tell you that most of the really poor people's doors that I've knocked on are not the least bit interested in voting for anybody or anything. They've heard it all before, they've heard the promises, and nothing ever changes for them. And 20 years later, in the places that I was doing that, it's still the same.
So
I
what,
certainly understand what you're
if
saying.
you don't vote, what's the
Yeah.
solution? How is that better
I
than what
said
we've got?
massive public pressure, like it says right here. The next
In lieu of
move
voting?
I'm talking about what MLK, you're handing out this right here, to begin public demonstrations, mass nonviolence, civil disobedience, and mass arrest to protest the plight of poverty.
Okay.
There's
that's-
no-
In lieu or in addition is still
We
there.
wouldn't have gotten any
What is your
additional. We wouldn't have gotten any.
Okay, no, you
additional
are right, I
support.
understand what you're
You've
saying.
gone on and on and on and on and on about your point, and I'm trying to.
No, but
have
you're,
many
the
points
bottom
here.
line is that we have to make sure
I didn't
that
say
people
don't vote. Go ahead and
exercise
vote.
their right to
I'm gonna
vote.
vote down ticket, I'm gonna vote for Jason Campbell and Kayla, and I'm gonna vote for, but, I mean, I've voted. I've got 2 people on the board of soups, and that we lost, we couldn't even get Regina Gage in there, so we would have had enough supervisors to maybe start cleaning house in this county. Nobody even noticed the importance of having her in there, so they have 3 pretty decent, one spectacular, your supervisor, people that could clean house. Because we've got a really rotten, corrupt county.
Well, no, you're
We didn't
absolutely,
even have anybody go up against the DA, against flip-ups.
right.
Nobody even ran against him, we can't even do that. So we got systemic, real serious problems here, and if we just do another sitting out at a table and taking names and telling people to vote,
Well, that's not due diligence, as
that's
far as
not
I'm
due
concerned.
diligence.
Due diligence is getting people to vote, showing up to city council
Okay,
meetings
but
and demonstrating in
that's not the
mass.
number one thing, that should be done in concert with a bunch of other things.
Well, that's why we're coming up with the
So all we're
subcommittee.
talking about is
But
voting,
let's
voting,
go to
voting.
the young lady in the black, and then the gentleman back there, and then John, and then, okay, so,
What I would suggest for this thing is maybe there's usually the subcommittee for whatever you.
I'm
well,
on a
no.
million subcommittees, I'm not a do-nothing,
Well,
yeah.
I'm not suggesting, but I mean, it's
I
like,
just came here to see the co-op meeting.
well,
person.
to me, it's like, no, I don't wanna get into a big argument, but it's like, I kind
We
of
need
feel
big
like,
arguments.
Let's be proactive.
There's a lot of work. There's a
Right.
lot of work to do here. And again, we can carry this offline, because I don't wanna, yes, I agree the system needs to be overturned. But while the system is not being overturned, we got a lot of work to do.
right.
I gotta raise my kid and, so.
And I agree with Juana here, because I know public action can be powerful. We did that with SAS, Safe Ag, Safe Schools, regarding pesticides up in Sacramento. And
Made an impact.
but you would be maybe a good person to be in charge of that. I couldn't do that, but I think that should be part of the agenda too.
Well, it's on here, yes, John.
Everything we've accomplished in this county has been because we've done the work to get a bunch of people around and issue. So like rent control, or something like that, or food security. But you don't go in and just tell people to vote for, something, or whatever, some indecipherable propositions that are very important. I'll grant you that. But you have to have something that hooks people into action, into stepping up and showing up.
Okay.
And telling them the vote is not sexy.
Well, you know what, we appreciate
do
your,
something.
we appreciate your
You gotta do
input and your
something, people.
opinion. And you won't be on that committee, obviously, because that's not what you're passionate about. You are passionate about mass, public showing at city council meetings, and that's the committee that we could probably.
So a direct action subcommittee
Yeah, the
maybe?
direct action
About
subcommittee.
transfer.
So, and I'm gonna start writing names down shortly about that, so yes, Sean.
I hope no one in the room will be insulted by my suggestion, but on each of these focal areas, I think it's important to marshal the cooperation of entities that already exist. So you mentioned Mrs. Rucker.
Right.
So clearly, she will be an ally. With regard to public manifestations and protests and so on, I think that's a terrific complement to voter recruitment. We have indivisible local chapters who are already very well equipped with volunteers and so on. I just wanted to make sure that in the process we don't overlook
Is there representation from Indivisible here?
I haven't seen.
Okay.
And then I noticed the list of participation of the earlier meeting. I wasn't surprised. I was happy to see some, but there were some organizations that were notably absent.
Right. Well, we have to work with what we've got at this point.
No, I realize that, but I mean, maybe they just didn't know.
Yeah,
Or
well,
maybe
that
they
is
had
very
another
possible.
thing going on the same day.
So Ron had his hand up next, and then Anita.
Yeah. There we go. Mom?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I gotta watch out what I say because, I'm running against Jimmy Panetta for Congress. So what I see here is item number 10. Item number 10 on page 2 says, "We will do our work in a nonpartisan way. No elected officials or candidates get the stage." So the other thing that was recommended is that there be an endorsement committee. And I don't think there should be an endorsement committee based upon the 10th principle. The other thing that I think they're trying to get with us on that 10th principle is they're trying not to mix politics with a 501c3. They don't want to jeopardize their status with the IRS. And that's why they're saying in this particular paragraph, we'll do our work in a nonpartisan way. You see where I'm going? They don't want to
Okay,
get
so
attacked by
this
the IRS.
is the deal. This is
Yeah.
not our guiding principle. This is their guiding principle. And quite frankly, anyone that's running for public office or not can be a part of this committee. We aren't going to be using all of these. We just are looking at what they're doing. And then if there's something that people feel strongly about that we want to add on as a guiding principle, we can after some discussion about it. But the bottom line is that we're not a 501c3. We currently have our NAACP treasurer holding all of the Poor People's Campaign funding until such time that we decide what we're going to do and so on and so forth, and how that will be utilized. So
Now you're saying that we're not part of the Poor People's Campaign, but.
we're not
yes,
part
we
of
are.
the national, no, this was
Part of
brought
the NAACP
so that you
in
can
Monterey County.
see what, Reverend Barber is a member of the National Board of Directors of the NAACP.
Are you suggesting that we take out that paragraph? Because I like that it's nonpartisan.
I agree.
And I'm not, the other side, I'm not any.
Okay, this is not about a Republican, a Democratic, a
Green.
person, or a Jew or a Gentile. This is about anyone.
Guidance for us, that's what
Right.
she's talking about. I agree with what she just said.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
right now, what I'm saying is that this is not for, we're not for one or the other. We're doing what is right for the people, particularly the most vulnerable people in our society.
That should be the objective. I agree
Right.
with that. I do.
I like the part about no elected officials did the stage.
Right?
I agree.
Well, they can
with that.
support it.
Are we taking that out? Is it?
No,
is that what
this,
you were
we're not
suggesting?
even using this. We're
Okay.
coming up with our own. This is just a tool for you to
I
review.
understand that, but you seem to say that you were.
No, I said, you look at this tool and let's come up with our own that are germane to Monterey County. Yeah, so at any rate, did someone else have, Anita?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to John. What we did with we had a list of people that attended the first meeting. We combined them with the people that signed up for the 831 community involvement calendar. We added all of those names to the NAACP, and that's the mailing list. So if there are other organizations that aren't included, we certainly would love to know about them.
Yeah,
But
I
there's a big,
just think there's a
huge
lot
long
of
list.
potential
Yeah.
strength in those alliances that have already been recognized, and there might be some that are there, but just,
If we could leverage them.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's the key. So I think they've been informed, we now have to collaborate.
Maybe there should be an outreach committee, and then, you know, somebody could do some outreach to the people.
So I put that down as there's an outreach committee, that could certainly happen. Are there any other strong opinions about other subcommittees that you want to see?
Part of the outreach could also be in charge of the handouts, any pamphlets that we could just hand out to people with information about the Poor People's Campaign. And so they know about it, and have it, let them know that this is going on right now.
Sure.
So outreach maybe that would be, do we already have that?
I noted that. Pardon me, do we already have,
Somebody in charge of,
we have no one in charge of anything at this point.
oh,
This is our third meeting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing right now, is coming up with subcommittees and who feels strongly about what committee they want to work on. What I'm going to recommend is that if there aren't enough people in this room that want to work on a particular subcommittee, that you recruit others to be on your subcommittee, and then when we come back together as a group, that we bring back our information. And I think that this is not going to be something that happens overnight, and that due diligence has to happen, and it should really be well thought out and inclusive, and then bring it back to the committee and you know, state how data proves that this is a need or not, and or why you feel strongly even if there is no data around it. But you know, I think when you follow the money in Monterey County, you'll find out that there are resources available to deal with a number of these issues that are, like for example, the voter registration office. They have maybe some kiosks that could be set up in certain locations as well. So, you know, and again, the reality here is that there's no one committee is overpowering. I am passionate about voter registration, so that's the committee that I'm going to be on. If someone else is passionate about the, let's see, public pressure committee, then that's the committee that they can head up. But we know that our national convention, the 109th annual NAACP National Convention, was about don't hate, vote. And voting should be a fundamental right for everyone. And so the NAACP all over the country is pushing voter registration and voter empowerment. And so I think that voting, if you don't exercise your right to vote, then don't complain. And if you have a complaint and you put someone in office and they're not doing what you need them to do, then put them out. Put someone else that you feel is gonna do what is required of them, what the people need them to do. And so just because someone may be popular and they may have, you know, like a family legacy or whatever the case may be, that is not a reason to vote for people. We have to look at the people's actions in terms of what is their voting record. So
That didn't work with me when I just told people I wasn't gonna vote for Hillary. Because I looked at her actions and I could not vote for her, and I got nothing but grief.
yeah, well, that's really unfortunate because this is
It
America.
was all my fault.
At the last meeting we had that was up at the church, we all checked off what we wanted to work on, and so I was sitting at the table with Alana Haygood Miles, and I know she put down voter registration as I did. So I'm thinking that somebody maybe should take responsibility for, going through the list, seeing those people who, said that's what they want to work on, and A, either have a separate meeting, see when most people can meet, or B, we could have breakout sessions at the next meeting and have those people go into another room. But I think at this point, time is of the essence, and I think that there should just be these subcommittees put into motion.
And that's what we're doing right now.
I
Yeah,
agree.
but where will it be that the next meeting then will be with breakout sessions, or each committee or subcommittee will determine for themselves when they want to meet? Is that, do you know, I mean, because it seems there are two options. They
So
either-
we have currently the people in this room that showed up today, which is, everybody knew that we're making some decisions today. There are 7 subcommittees that people put forward. Now, what I am proposing is that the people that put their subcommittee forward will take responsibility and chair that particular committee, and then organize a meeting with whoever. Now, if you want to use these meetings to have subcommittees do breakouts, that's fine, because at the church we were at, there are tables, and people can go on a table with their subcommittee and start working on their stuff there, or they can do it outside of the meeting. But voting is of the essence for me, so I'm gonna hit the ground running with you and Alana, and there are 4 other people that put that as their top priority too, so.
I was just wondering what other people thought would be the best way of doing that, whether.
Okay,
Could
well, I think,
Could I add a suggestion that kind of combines with what you said and what Judy said? If the people that are in this room today will go up on your sign-up list and put your top priority, I will take that information and the information we collected during the first meeting and create a mailing list for each category of the 7 that you've got 7 groups there.
right.
So of those 7 groups, we'll take today's attendees and the previous, does that sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just send we can send an email that says you indicated an interest, talk among yourselves.
Regina, can you read out the 7 that we have at the moment?
Okay, so the first one I have is voter education, voter empowerment. The second one is criminal justice. Third is data committee. Fourth is grading scale committee. Fifth is public pressure committee. Sixth is public resources and funds availability in the county committee, and then an outreach committee. Is the
What
seventh.
happens to Brent?
Oh, that was just, that's not a committee,
That's
that was
probably the-
just a
that's probably the
focus,
perfect-
but I'm gonna research it before I go further, sorry.
Oh,
And
you-
what I've heard about it, I just need to get clear on that.
I didn't mean that, I meant rent as an issue
Oh, right,
on
housing,
which to
housing.
attract voters.
Right, housing,
That would attract people to actually do something.
yeah, housing
Rent's
was
too damn high.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Were there people that were here last time or this time that were interested in homelessness as a
Yes.
committee?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, 'cause
And I have
that's-
housing as the 8th one, because that didn't
Okay, because I
mention-
nobody, it wasn't in what you just read. So.
Yeah, housing.
Right, no one mentioned it today,
So
but.
there was homelessness and the cost of housing, which really, are we gonna group all that under housing?
Yeah, we could,
Okay.
yes.
Are we okay with that? All right. Those were very top, Janet, those
Yeah,
2.
and along with feeding people.
Right.
Yeah, we should do that first.
Can I ask if someone knows that the percentage that's supposed to be the appropriate percentage that a person should be spending? It's 30%. I've heard it and reading about it. They say if you're paying more than 30% of your income into rent, then, but I've heard a number.
That is what the subcommittee's gonna work on. They're gonna do due diligence and get us all that data and information so that we can make informed decisions.
I'd like to suggest we come up with a meeting in August for this big group, and if the subcommittees could do a breakout at that meeting,
Mhm.
fine, and if too many of the people interested in that particular topic can't do that day, they should come up with an alternative one.
Okay, so are you all, let's look at the calendar in August. In August on Saturday, is Saturday a good day? Because we have the 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th.
Not the 3rd Saturday, please.
So what about the 25th? Is that too late, or is that a good day in August? That's the 4th Saturday in August. Would that be, is everyone available? Yes.
Is that a Japanese meeting?
The Oban Fest, no?
No, the,
Oh, Jekyll.
Lantern of Lights?
You're right.
It is.
Let me look on my calendar. That might not be, but that meeting, I don't know what time that meeting is, let's see. Just so you all know, in August, yes, that is Jekyll. The Japanese American Citizens League has a meeting from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., which LULAC, the NAACP, and someone from the Japanese American, and I think someone from the Jewish community will be sitting on a panel from 2 to 4. So what we could do is, I don't think that that day is going to work for me, but the time could work if it could be at 5 instead of at 4 or 2.
Sunday. How about early?
What about Sundays? If we use the church, that's not going to be a good.
Earlier in the month?
Or earlier in the day?
What about earlier that Saturday?
Saturday
Like
like
10-ish?
10, that would work.
What was the date?
The 25th.
25th. See, that way y'all can hit it and quit, and then you can go right on into the other thing.
Is the other open to the public?
Yes, that's open to the public
Okay.
at the Jekyll Hall down in Monterey.
I know where that is.
Mhm.
Could we
It's
meet
at the-
here, or we don't know until we ask?
No, I already cleared it with one of the churches on the 25th. We'll go back to Victory Temple because they have the round tables and it's roomy so the subcommittees can sit at each. And then that way, one thing is that if we've already got people on subcommittees, when we do meet, they can go to their committee table, you know, and they could probably be doing things in between if they have to collect some research data or whatever the case may be.
That's on Broadway, right?
That's on Broadway
And, like
and
Yosemite.
Yosemite.
Right on the top, you'll see the Victory Temple right there on the top. It's the one right across the street, cause it's two churches.
From the fire department, right?
Right across
across
from
the
the fire
fire
department is Victory Temple.
It was a little hard to find the door to go in, so maybe if there's a little bit better signage telling people how to get there, because some of us went around the building and
Oh,
so, I don't know, just
let me see.
would be helpful.
So 10 to noon on,
So 10 to noon is good.
the last door toward the fence.
I will not be able to make that, but there's plenty of people who can.
And what group are you with?
I am not with a group, I'm here on my own.
Oh, okay, what's your name?
No, no children?
No, I think did I speak with you on the phone?
Yes, I think so.
Thanks for coming. Okay, great. So basically, can we just record the names of who wants to head the Criminal Justice Committee up? Who mentioned that? Someone mentioned criminal justice, so we'll leave that blank for now.
I was wondering about that. You said that you do that now, you go into jails?
Well, I have been, but the NAACP has a criminal justice chairperson, and that's an elderly person that's currently ill right now. So I've been filling in and going into jails and courts and so on and so forth.
So I would like to do that, but I haven't done that before, so I don't know how.
Okay, well, that's okay, we can help you.
Okay,
Okay, can you spell your complete name for me?
it's Christie, CHRISTIE, and then Turano, TURANO. And
And you're with Whites for Racial Equity?
And SAS, Safe Ag, Safe Schools. We're putting buffer zones around schools for pesticides. So those are the two that I work with.
Okay. And their acronym is WRE, is it? White
Yep.
for Racial?
Yeah.
All right, and then,
So,
I'm sorry.
what, can you sign up for more than one?
Sure.
So I'll sign up for the restorative justice, the criminal justice.
Okay, and which other one did you say?
Whatever.
Okay, then, so then the data committee,
Are you looking for chairs, Regina, or just participation? Because we can get participation on
Chairs
it.
first, and then we can
Let's
sign
do
up.
chairs.
Right, I think she's looking.
I want to sign up for that vote.
okay.
Thought we were gonna, yeah.
Right now, you're looking for chairs, is that right?
I'm looking for chairs and members.
Okay, then take my name. That sounds good.
I'll go,
Not sure.
I'll twist her arms.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you do that,
That's
Regina?
awesome.
Oh, yeah.
She wants to take it. Tell me your name.
What?
Wada wants to take her name off of
No,
the
I,
list.
Chair.
I
Don't take her
didn't know that you were only gonna look at chairs.
No, I'm not looking for only chairs and committee members, so you don't necessarily have to be a chair.
See?
Just need to
Okay.
know. And then, okay, so the data committee,
I'll do that.
and can you spell your name for me?
Yeah, N-A-L-I-N-I, Nalini, and then Elkins, E-L-K-I-N-S.
I'll go on that committee too.
I'd like to work on that committee.
Great.
What's your name?
Nona Childress?
Yeah, people, or if you guys give me your emails, we can have a, yeah.
And who else? Anyone else?
Helen Davis.
Okay, good. Now, the grading scale committee, that's like the the political report
I
card.
said so.
Okay, what's your,
Wes, W-E-S, and White, W-H-I-T-E.
okay, great. Anyone else on that committee?
I figured I'd be by myself.
And I think it might be a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I'll jump on.
Yes, sir? Oh, you want to be on? And what's your name?
Paul.
Well, you can just
Carl
not do your
McCall.
district.
McCall. Spell that for me.
M-C-C-A-L-L.
Okay. And then the public pressure committee,
I'd rather call that direct action.
direct action, okay, that's
Yes, I would intend to be doing
It's okay to say, interested in that even if it's a policeman.
What are we on now? I'm sorry, I just.
We're looking at the direct action committee,
Oh, I'd like to be on that.
okay.
That's protest, right?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And anyone else? Yes.
Is that troublemaker from way back?
If this meeting was over.
I'd like to be on that.
Who's second?
Janet Wilson.
Okay, and then, what about the public resources funds committee? Public resources and funds. That means like, for example, we know that all these tax initiatives that we're paying into, where's the money going? Is it going for what it's supposed to be going for? What is the intention of it, like Measure X, the transportation tax, where we could actually get a transportation van to make sure that we get homeless people to appointments and so on and so forth. I mean, there's just a number of things that we could do with that. So I can leave that blank for now if there's no interest. And then the outreach committee,
That's the same thing as just information distribution.
mm-hmm,
I would like to be part of that.
okay. And then the housing committee, anyone, okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to be on that as well, but
Janet.
I really don't know anything about it.
And what's your name, sir?
Steve Eckler,
Spell it for me.
E-K-L-U-N-D.
E-K-U-O-N-D?
E-K-L-U-N-D.
Okay. Anyone else? Judy? Okay. Great. Wonderful. Okay, so I don't have any other subcommittees right now, but that doesn't mean the more traction we get, the more people that we can add to. What I would like to say though, is that these aren't gonna be like just a little fly-by-night stuff. This is going to be about doing our due diligence, making sure that we create best practices in terms of all of our subcommittees, so that we can make sure, because every one of these committees, for example, the Direct Action Committee, we can look at, for example, the LCAP funding and MPUSD. We may not be showing up at every school board meeting, but when it's necessary for us to show up to to say, we do not want school resource officers in our schools because we have a school to prison pipeline that gets created as a result of that, then we need to show up. Because I'm gonna tell you, I was there on 3 different meetings and not very many people were there. And they just, when they see people from the outside show up, they're going to do the right thing. Because we're the voters.
That's what I'm saying.
Regina, did you ask for the people who wanted to be on the voter registration committee? I know you mentioned it, but I didn't know if people gave their names who wanted to be on that committee.
I gave my name, but
Yeah,
do you
but
want?
other people I think might want.
And I have John's name. Is there anyone else that wants to be on board?
Ann McDowell.
And, okay,
I want to help, but I don't want to be on the committee.
okay. And Warren. Okay, great. And yes.
I just want to say that direct action, there's an action that's today for, against Trump's immigration practices.
Right, keeping families
And
together.
it's 2 intersections in Salinas, but it's Sanborn and Market, and Sanborn and East LaSalle. And they're asking people to wear white if they can, and to bring a sign that in some way addresses don't put children in jail,
Okay.
children and parents together. The last one, we had over 40 people, and so this, I think, is the 4th demonstration in Salinas. So that's today from 5 to 7.
Right. Now, the other thing I want to bring your attention to is we have a reunification rally happening tomorrow at City
Yes.
Hall
Yes.
regarding this very subject
Right.
of the
Both
children
places.
in detention. I think that people don't realize that people from African countries also have issues happening around detention, and the media is not covering it. So it's not only our Latino brothers and sisters. These are people of African ancestry and people from African countries that are being detained as well. We don't see people from Europe being detained like the ones that are of color. So I think that anyone that can show up tomorrow at City Hall at 4:30, from 4:30 to 6:30, so that we can speak out on this issue. We have invited the media to be present, and you know, we can also make announcements about the Poor People's Campaign and other things. So I think it's important for all of us to, you know, the whole issue around direct action is critical in terms of really showing up at the Board of Supervisors in particular, because they have money that they're allocating and they have forgotten about us on the Monterey Peninsula. And, you know, all these people that are going before them, they have a few people that show up, and I'm like, where are all the Peninsula people? No one's showing up, so we do need direct action, definitely.
What are suggestions for signs for that tomorrow?
Well, for tomorrow, we ask that any signage be kept kid-friendly, because we're asking families to show up too, so whatever you feel
So
passionate
it'd be
about.
similar to what we're doing in Salinas?
Right,
It's just like-
absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we have Joyce and then Garnett.
All right, my question is ICE actually, do they have detention centers in Monterey County?
They had a detention center in the jail.
They have people in the jail that they're detaining. That's
Well, they
what
have an ICE officer in the jail.
You could use the same sign if you were.
Yeah,
I don't know if that ICE officer's still there, but we're gonna go back and find out. Is the ICE still in the jail?
Yeah.
He's not.
I just wondered if there were any detention centers in Monterey County, then we ought to be addressing that.
Yeah.
And the people in it, but I don't know.
We
but
need to
this is all
find
we know
out,
about.
because kids are afraid to go home. They think that they're afraid to go to school. One little kid told me that, I asked him why he was so upset, and he told me that he's not sure if his mother's gonna be home because of Donald Trump. And that just broke my heart, where this little boy, he's already behind in his reading level. And these kids don't need to be thinking about this trauma that's happening to them. That they're,
People too.
right, exactly. So,
It's not partisan.
go ahead, Garnett.
I had to take a call, but the committee around the mental health, and I'll be included in that.
Okay, so mental health committee.
Is there a mental health committee?
That's the
Nice.
Number 9.
Regarding to the public funding, actually speaking of.
Yeah.
Mental health's a closed thing that's been running around this country for years. Now you're just putting a label on it.
Come on. Thank you, my brother.
Okay, so I don't know if many of you know that I had, as a profession, I am a social worker who retired from the Monterey County Child Welfare System. And that system was a very horrific system in terms of what it did to children of color in this county. And as a result, I was moved to open a mental health clinic to co-found this agency, the Village Project, to provide mental health therapy to underserved community members. And it's for all people, and it serves people from a culturally congruent perspective, including people from Ireland. So the bottom line is that mental health is a critical issue, and Monterey County is controlling the purse strings of the mental health dollars by the millionaires in California. There's a whole issue around this going on. There's prevention and early intervention dollars that could be happening for this Poor People's Campaign, but we don't even know about this. So as we move forward, we're going to be talking about all these kinds of things, because if we sit back and allow the counties to do the same old thing and our numbers continue to be horrible, then we are just, you know, what's the point, you know? But we have to speak truth to power. Now, John, you had mentioned something?
Oh, yeah, actually Garnett brought it out, that the public funds in the community is part of what you just spoke on. He was getting clarification.
Okay, so I'll put them on that public funds.
And me too.
Okay.
I'd like to be on the mental health too.
Okay.
What kind of action, what what is the vision of what that would entail? I mean, just to get the information out that there's funds for help? Or there's no counseling
We
in the
can work to
schools?
we can work to make sure that that happens, because this is the reality. Is if you are seeing a poor person that is sitting on a bench with a cover and a basket, and they may be experiencing some trauma, someone needs to be able to go and talk to that person to say, is there something I can do to help you?
Yeah.
Let me help you. That's not available in this community, because what's happening is those dollars are going to the county and the same old thing that they're doing, instead of going to the people that really need them the most.
So what you're saying, there's money allocated that's not being provided.
There's money not being allocated to the right places.
Right, that's what I want.
People are being left behind. Kids are having trauma, mental health trauma. Those kids are just basically railroaded through, oh, we'll get you an assessment through the behavioral health, but you gotta get out here to Marina Clinic. The kids don't wanna go to the clinic because they're not culturally congruent. People want to talk to people that they know understand how to work with them and what their cultural dynamics and norms are. And the thing is that, you know, if you found out what I know about the mental health dollars, because we found out a study was done that over in California, like something like $80 billion is being withheld in mental health dollars in all these counties, and they haven't spent them when people in our communities need mental health treatment. So that's something that we're gonna have to take some direct action on here in Monterey County.
Yeah, that's good.
I wanted to suggest for all the committees that one place that they might start is by finding some shared academic resources or something that's informing you about your issue if you're not particularly up on it. You know, some people are going to gravitate to issues they already know very well, but you know, like if you could start with identifying some things to read about the issue, because that's what I'm saying, always inform yourselves before you start trying to inform other folks. So that would be a good way to, and then maybe the vision might come out of that, what you're going to do.
Can I give an example of what that could look like? For example, let's take the criminal justice situation. One arrest of a child or an adult results in hundreds of thousands of dollars of money being spent to criminalize the kid or adult versus prevention. Now, could you imagine if a person was experiencing some mental health issue and they did a crime, instead of sending them to prison, let's send them to the community, that there is funding available to help with their drug addiction issue, to help with their job skill needs, to help with their therapeutic intervention needs. There's a whole model that could be used instead of railroading people to jail and prison, that could be used in our community to treat people in a preventive way. That, I'm not talking about people that are killing people, I'm talking about people that have been incarcerated for smoking dope in public and that kind of stuff. You know, it's kind of ridiculous when a lot of these folks have trauma and they self-medicate with, and a lot of people have so many like depression and mental health issues and family situations and all kinds of things that drive them to do drugs and alcohol. And I think that because they end up falling within the penal code, when they come in contact with law enforcement, and I am sad that the police chief left because I was going to talk to him about, you know, let's, instead of sending this report to the district attorney's office, send it to our community hub where we have a program to help these folks. Because once you go to the DA's office, everybody's going to start getting paid. The judge, the bailiff, the this, the that, the whole bucket of people,
Wow.
and no one's
And
ever
we know how
going
to
to get
monetize
paid.
We don't know what they don't prosecute either. I mean, I do know personally in some cases that the police thought that in one case a domestic abuser should have been arrested, and the thing was just dropped by the DA. And we do not know that unless somebody does deep investigation into what kind of cases are brought and how many of them are ever charged.
And when
we
I
have no way of knowing. That's really difficult.
You know what?
Even for an investigative reporter to find
You're
out.
absolutely right. When I say all politics is local, that's what I'm talking about. When I say that, I'm not just like broadly saying it. Let me put some connotation on it. We need to have a relationship with law enforcement in all of our
They
communities.
need to know who we are.
Right, we need to know how
we
many
need
people are
standing with
arrested.
those
and
people.
what- We need to be checking out those things so that we can follow and make sure that we can make informed decisions about what these things are and what is happening with this and how can we help.
Well, we need help. I don't really want to help patty rollers, but we need to.
What is
be-
patty
we-
rollers?
Police,
Oh,
What is it?
police
It's
officers.
all patty rollers.
Police officers,
Patty.
back in the day,
Patty.
chasing, the history of policing is
Patty
from
wagon,
chasing slaves,
yeah.
enslavement.
that is
Really?
But, you know, I don't want to go and ask them, I want to tell them and let them know that we're the boss.
Right.
Exactly.
For too
No,
long,
I agree.
Right.
We're always going, please,
Recognize
can I have another
stakeholders.
plum? You know, we need to stop that.
So does it also include, from what I heard you when you brought it up in the first place, I'm aware of the problem, I'm understanding it, and I'm also, you know, defeated by the numbers and color and the fact that you know, that the prison system is the second largest industry in California, you know, second to ag. So I'm aware of it, and I think it's, and it's nationwide, it's a broken system, it's wrong.
Oh, it works just the way it's supposed to.
But I'm wondering, what,
Right there.
we need to somehow, there's a book called The Devil Has Slippery Shoes, and it's the history of the Head Start program that started out of the South and the Civil Rights program, where people said, we're gonna take this opportunity through civil rights and we're gonna get some education for these kids. And people all over the nation did it. There has to be a mass movement where people say, it's enough. There's, you know, there's something really, really wrong here that's happening with the numbers of
It's got to directly impact your life.
of people that are of color incarcerated. So what you're saying is going to the jail and at least making some kind of relationship with a child or a person of color or anybody that is in the criminal justice system and let them know that you are a citizen advocate? I mean, does that happen?
Well, there are a number of things that have to, it's a much broader picture than that, but what we're gonna have to do is due diligence. We've gotta get the data look at who are these folks, where are they coming from, what cities they are coming from. I mean, because I went already and met with the district attorney and the new person that's coming in unopposed, and I went there with some community people to get data. I wanted race, for the history of his time in office, how many people have been arrested in Monterey County for what they have been arrested for, and so on and so forth. And he said he does not keep data on. So
But every
probably all in
form
manila
that we
folder.
go, every form that we have to tell our race. I mean, even if I wanna get, a rewards card from Costco or whatever.
Right.
I have to put my race, and now I put
That's what I'm
human
saying
being.
is happening right now. So, but we're getting ready to make sure that we get that data, because it's important that we understand.
That seems so outrageous.
Mhm.
Sorry. No, some of this stuff is a matter of public record.
Right.
There's gotta be some database that we can search.
Before we go for 1 second, McCall wanted to ask
Yeah.
a question that may be germane to everyone.
A couple of days ago, I was coming to Monterey, getting on the bus, and a lady got off the bus. A white lady got off the bus, and when she got off the bus, the police rushed her, about 5 police cars. Okay, and the reason why they rushed her, because she was talking to a mop as if it was a human being. And so they were gonna arrest her. They were gonna slam her down, and I'm standing there and watching this stuff, so I pull out my camera. And when I pull out my camera, the eyes, everything changed. All of a sudden, they became her best friend. I'm sitting there watching this, I'm saying, whoa. And I turned, they looked at me, and so I knew already, I walked away. Because that was over with. I walked away. But why do we have to go through that type of...
And you're lucky you didn't get shot.
Well, that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. I'd like to see a report like that come back to some group that would actually go to whatever police department that was and just raise bloody murder. Raise bloody hell.
There's all kinds of people out
10 or
there.
20 people go into the police department and say, what TF, what are you doing? This is what happened.
And mental
What
health wasn't called.
training, are you giving these people? That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of brazen people in law
Act like
enforcement.
ants, they're taking care
So,
of.
and hopefully we can help shape policy for more service intervention of just mental health professional rather than
Right,
guns.
yeah. Yes, sir.
I haven't seen any numbers on this lately, but a couple of years ago I read that like 70% of the inmates in the Monterey County Jail had never been convicted of anything. But they
Bail.
asked for bail.
Yeah,
Shouldn't there be a way to let some of those folks, depending on what they're accused of, but, if they're accused of mass murder or something, but, if it's a minor crime and they can be taken care of someplace.
No, we're gonna get that is why when I say due diligence, we are going to get the facts, and we're gonna do this report card so that people, it's no longer business as usual in Monterey County.
That would be
Because
good.
this is a very powerful group, and the power is in the hands of the people, and we are the people. And so if we just continue to do nothing, we're gonna get nothing. But if we organize ourselves and get all this together and move forward, then this is going to be the impetus for change that we need to make. So thank you all for coming here. We'll send out a mass notice to all of you, letting you know that, well, if you can mark it on your calendar already, that we're meeting on the 25th from 10 to noon, and we'll break out into our subcommittees, and we'll send it to all the other people that are already on the list as well. And if you know, Victory Temple Church of God in Christ on Broadway, on the corner of Broadway and Yosemite Street.
And we'll have a sign to show which
Yeah,
door.
they'll put the sign, they have this little marquee sign out there, I'll ask the pastor to come through the parking lot door.
If the first one I'm marking is not the first one I
So we're not gonna do subcommittees no more. We're just gonna do that then.
We can do if you are already chair of a committee and you want to start doing your work and getting more people on your committee, fine. If you want to start doing due diligence right now, go for it. So that when you come back, whatever committee you have signed up for, you are ready to go and have a vision of what you want to see happen on that committee.
Thank you, Regina.
Okay, thank you guys. There's some